just a little bit easier. Of course, there is the chat bar there that you have already put your names and your teaching experience in there, which is awesome. So you are feel free to go ahead and type any questions you have in the chat box while I'm presenting, and then I'll take times during the presentation to answer any of your questions. Well, you've already typed in the chat area, so I know that you've found that. And I think you guys also found the, well, I know at least one of you has found the raising your hand feature. And so, that's always an option as well. If you want to get my attention, you can always raise your hand. I think for me, it's probably easier if you just type in the chat box, to be quite honest with you, but raising your hand is an option as well. So before we move on, we have a wide variety of experience here today. We have Chris, who looks like you've been teaching for 41 years, which is, wow, incredibly impressive and inspiring. And Terry, you've been teaching for 2 years, so we have like the wide gamut here. And that's great. AP Insight is a program that if I had been a new teacher, I would have really, been super appreciative for. But even having taught AP US History for 10 years, it's something that I'm excited to really work into my classroom next year. Like I said, I was part of piloting some of the instructional materials for AP Insight. But next year will be my first year really integrating the whole program into my classroom, and I'm looking really forward to that, especially the technological aspect of the assessments and the feedback it provides students. So whether you've been teaching for 41 years or 2 years, it's certainly a program that I think we can all work into our own teaching style. So let's go ahead and, like I said, get this going. As you can see, I kind of am behind on the click, so this is just kind of a review. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them right into the chat bar there. So for our presentation today, we really have 3 different goals. And the first goal will be for you to be able to implement some of these instructional resources and assessments that we're going to look at today. Also, there should be some time in the training for you to start thinking about how you would plan using this material and this program in your course. And then also showing you where you can get ongoing support throughout the year, like it says on the screen there, through online modules and collaboration with other Insight teachers. Also, a small logistical thing, if one of you wouldn't mind typing, just to make sure you are seeing the slides, if one of you wouldn't mind confirming that in the chat bar before I'm assuming something that, oh good, one of you is typing. Oh, both of you are typing. This is great. Okay, you see it. Just making sure. I would hate to go through this whole thing and find out you couldn't see anything. All right. Well, we're going to start by talking about what exactly is AP Insight. So AP Insight is a formative instruction and assessment system, and the idea behind it is to help teachers focus their courses strategically and really anticipate and address student misunderstandings. AP Insight was designed with teachers involved, of course, and it's really designed to help all students succeed. And what happened in its creation is that by identifying the areas that were seen as both foundational for AP US History as well as challenging areas in AP US History, focusing on both of those, instructional materials and assessments have been made to help students achieve success. So as you can see there, it's the little equation at the bottom. There's instructional resources and assessments for learning. Oh, I see there is a message that the slides are coming up, but there is no sound. And that is from Chris. Terry, if you can hear me, type. You can hear me. Okay, let's try Chris just momentarily. Thank you for your patience. Chris, if you can hear me, go ahead and type now. Chris is not typing. All right. Well, let me, my apologies, Terry, just wait one little second and let's see if I can figure out how to get Chris to be able to hear. Okay, and again, Terry, thank you for your patience. Okay, Chris's speakers are not muted, but I do see that her microphone is popped up. So let's see if she disables her microphone, if that will solve the problem. Okay, let's just take a minute to see if dislabeling her microphone will make a difference, hopefully. Okay, Chris, can you hear now? I may just have Chris log out and log back in and see if that would make a difference for her. Or him. I guess Chris could be either. Oh, my Terry, I think you can hear me. My form said 12 Eastern, so I had 12 Eastern as the start time. So I apologize if there was any miscommunication on the start time. Let me go ahead and have Chris log out and in. And again, I apologize. I didn't foresee sound problems. Oh, yours says 12:30 Eastern. That's interesting. Well, perhaps more people will show up. Okay, let's see if Chris logs out. Oh, she's typing. Let's see if this will help us. Or he is typing. Chris is typing. Yes. Oh, I don't know why I'm talking to her. She says nothing is coming out. I was about to answer her chat question out loud. Okay, let me type. Oh, okay, she logged out, so hopefully she'll log back in. Okay. Let's all cross our fingers. Chris is back. Okay, Chris, hopefully you can hear. Crossing our fingers. Oh, Chris is not typing. That concerns me. Chris, can you hear me speaking? I'm guessing that's a no. Oh, she's typing. Oh, she can't hear. Oh, goodness. Well, this is an interesting challenge. Um, oh, she's logged out. Perhaps she's logging back in. Terry, I am so sorry. I'm trying to think of the best advice I can give without physically having my hands on someone else's computer. All right, we'll give her a couple of minutes to see if she logs back in. And if she doesn't, we'll just keep on going with the presentation. Oh, she is logging back in. Okay, I might give her just. Okay, double check again that your speaker is highlighted green. Okay, she is typing. She's probably going to write it is. Or he. Chris is probably going to write it is highlighted. Okay, Chris says that they will read the slides. Terry's typing. Maybe Terry has some advice. This is fun for all of us. again, my apologies. If I had a better solution to fix this, I'm not 100% sure why her audio would have gone out. Yeah, that's a good idea. Could just be the computer speakers themselves. Okay, well, I'll type to Chris. These are being recorded. Which means any of you, Chris or Terry, can look and go back and listen to these recordings at a later time. If your audio doesn't return. Okay. Well, let's keep going. I feel I feel terribly now for Chris. So I'm just going to type one thing. Okay, she says okay. Okay, well, we'll keep going here. So as I was saying, so we were talking just getting into what AP Insight is. So again, like I was saying, it's this combination of instructional resources as well as assessments for learning that are designed to help teachers anticipate student misunderstandings so they can plan and address them. Like I said in the previous slide, expert teachers identified foundational and critical areas that are required for course mastery and with which students struggle. And what they did is they built and curated all the instructional resources, and they wrote and ensured that the assessments targeted these right misunderstandings. And these same expert teachers lead the support that is provided throughout the year to teaching professionals. AP Insight provides assessments for learning built around these challenge areas. Now, I'm going to say the word challenge areas a few times. We will go into detail about what that means. So just if that's your question, hold that thought there. So AP Insight, the program, provides assessments for learning built around the challenge areas that teachers can incorporate into their class and help students overcome their misunderstandings and increase overall course mastery. AP Insight was piloted with teachers in a variety of districts who were instrumental in designing the tools that we are talking about and providing today. Feedback from teachers has been and continues to be incorporated into the program to address classroom realities, as well as to provide additional flexibility for implementation into the classroom. So this next slide here, that's a screenshot of what the homepage looks like. So this is a screenshot of the homepage of AP Insight. And later in the presentation, we'll actually have some time to log in and play around with AP Insight, but for now, this is a screenshot of the homepage. And I'm just going to type that to Chris because I don't think it says so on the slide itself. Okay, so as I said, this is a screenshot of the homepage. AP Insight provides tools, resources, and assessments with detailed feedback to help overcome student misunderstandings. And then when we talk about the assessments for learning, what we're talking about really is formative assessments. And if you can see here, again, this is another screenshot there. And if this is too small for you to see, you can go to the full screen where the 4 arrows are. You can zoom in and look a little closer if any of the graphics on the slide are too small. But you can see this is a screenshot of the assessment results. This is actually the results of the assessment right here. And you can see the different, excuse me, this is the class performance. Sorry, I think my vision is bad. I probably should go full screen. But it breaks down, you know, your performance of how many students struggled on one part or another part. And we'll be going into more detail again about each of these things later. The assessments come with each challenge area. And so when we talk more again about these challenge areas, you'll see how they're broken down, and there are assessments that go with each of these little building block challenge areas. And as I was saying, you know, the assessments are meant to be formative as opposed to summative, meaning that the students and your class as a whole, they're more in the realm of checking for understanding and seeing what misunderstandings and gaps for understanding need to be closed, as opposed to serving as a summative assessment of knowledge. So, you know, as you can have seen from the last slide, you know, there were students in that example screenshot that certainly hadn't achieved mastery for writing a thesis, or, you know, whatever else it showed in that particular example. And that's the idea. You want to be able to close the gaps of knowledge, and that's why these assessments are a formative based. AP Insight is based on, as I said, a research-based formative assessment approach. It's a synthesis of over 200 research papers on the impact of formative assessment in student performance. Based on that research, Insight has been designed around 3 strategies to achieve student success and student achievement. And you can see at the very top of the slide there, it has those 3 strategies. So the first one is strategic planning. So strategic planning resources help teachers identify where the challenge areas fit into your current course. And we'll talk certainly more about planning. The next focus is formative instruction resources. And that's kind of like that middle chunk where it says challenge area misunderstandings. So everything underneath this falls into our formative instruction resources. So this includes that each challenge area has a performance task, it has assessments, it has feedback reports, it has resources to act on the information from the feedback reports. And then finally, the last piece is being able to share what works. And as the name implies, this is the teacher's opportunity to share, communicate, and collaborate with peers who are also using AP Insight. And so if you focus on like the second point, that what I call formative instruction resources, or what it says on the slide here, challenge area misunderstandings. This next slide is an even more detailed look at that kind of second step, that formative instruction resources. And this is, again, a more detailed look at it, and, you know, how you would go through this challenge area. And as I said, that's actually the next step. We're going to go over that next, but just as a nice little overview here, for each challenge area, we prepare, then we do the teaching, then the students do the assessing and the feedback, and then there's the acting upon the feedback if there's any gaps that still need to be closed. Well, this is generally the point where I would answer questions from the chat bar. I feel terribly that half of the audience cannot hear. So let me take a moment to check in with Chris, and before I move on to the next slide. Oh, Terry's writing a question. Good, good. Okay, no questions for Terry. And that's great. So let me just tell Chris that we're moving on to the challenge areas. And telling her that she can make it full screen if she has trouble seeing the graphics. Okay, moving on to the challenge areas. So before we go into what exactly comprises a challenge area, we're going to look at why focus on challenge areas, or in my own words, how did these challenge areas evolve? And so this kind of gives us an idea of where these challenge areas came from. So using a data-driven approach and using teacher input, the challenge areas, there we go. I'm sorry, I need to zoom in on my own to see a little closer. There we go, now I can see. Okay, so if you look at the graphic here, what the the program did is at first it took into account teacher needs and student struggles, as you can see there, asking teachers what sort of supports they needed, what areas were students having the most struggles in. And then if you look at the top, the foundational things, these are things that were seen as, if you are going to succeed or have mastery in a U.S. history course, what skills are seen as foundational. And the input, where they received that input was not just from high school teachers, but from higher education. So speaking to professors and people in the higher education realm, what areas they thought were critical and foundational for mastery of U.S. history. So taking into account the higher education portion, knowing that our courses are designed to, mirror higher education courses, as well as prepare our students for being able to go into higher education. So they took that into account by talking to the people at that level. Again, taking in student needs as well as what teachers see as student needs. And then also taking into account the course exam itself, the AP exam, the culminating exam. They did a multiple choice analysis. They had input from the chief reader, and they did all of these things to figure out what areas in U.S. history are both most critical and most foundational for our students. And that's where they came up with the challenge areas. As you'll see in a second, the challenge areas are not just content, they're skills driven as well. So if we look, and I know you can read, but I'll just read this one little quote, and then that's probably the only thing I'll ever read from a slide. A challenge area is defined as a foundational yet challenging area of the course that is critical to students achieving course mastery. You can see that there is input, of course, from the AP US History framework in coming up with what these learning objectives is. It is certainly not an extra. I know that, again, having taught AP US History for 10 years, sometimes these things seem really overwhelming because it might seem like this additional, thing that you're trying to, fit in or replace. And it's really not an extra. The challenge areas are required content that experts have just identified as critical for student understanding. So as we look at the challenge areas, you'll see the things that are focused on are things you probably teach in your class anyway, and then probably with more emphasis on the historical thinking skills and areas where students are really struggling. So the challenge areas are designed to help students build their ability to apply historical thinking skills across different themes and periods. And you'll get more support in understanding how the challenge area and building blocks are defined via an online module. But here are the 10 challenge areas. So if you look at the challenge areas here, this is really what the program is, if you want to think of it, designed around. And let me just type that to Chris really fast. So these are the 10 challenge areas. You can see that they are historical thinking skills driven, as well as focusing on content. So for example, if you look at the, I guess we'll just go to the left, the top left corner, the theme is America and the world. Now the 7 themes should look familiar. These are the same themes that when the AP US History course was redesigned, these are the themes from AP US History, so this is not unique to Insight. Underneath those themes are our 10 challenge areas. So these are the 10 areas where there are the different resources for teaching and the assessments that go along with them. So each of these bullet points is a challenge area. And it's, again, an area of focus that's going to go through a number of periods in the course. it looks like we have an additional person. So Michael, if you can hear me, go ahead and type in the chat bar. Oh, he's typing. He can hear. That's great. We do have one person who's not hearing the audio. And Michael, it appears that there may have been some differing start times. So my apologies. Oh, he says he's coming in late. That's okay. You know what? There was some confusion on start times. So it's totally fine. We're just getting into the challenge areas that kind of compose the Insight program. And remember that these are all recorded, these presentations, and so you're welcome to, at the end of the presentation, I'll show you where you can find these recordings, and then Michael, you can just go back and listen to the first part of this presentation, and no big deal. And then Michael, as long as you're typing, go ahead and just real quickly type for us how long you've been teaching and then how long you've been teaching AP US history. And that way we have an idea. We have a wide variety here today. We have someone new to AP US history, or excuse me, has been teaching it for 1 year. And then we have someone who's been teaching 41 years. And then I'm kind of right in the middle, I suppose. I've been teaching AP US history for 10 years. So we'll see where Michael falls into our, kind of spectrum here. Okay, so it looks like, and I'm sure you can all read the chat bar too, but Michael, welcome. Oh, switching to AP from IB. Very interesting. So this was a, well, perfect time to switch over, Michael. As I said in the beginning, this is the kind of program that 10 years ago I would have loved had I been really starting out in AP US history. But anyway, if you look at the slide on the screen, these are the challenge areas that we're about to go into. So as I was saying, each bullet point is a challenge area. So if you look at America and the world, for example, that's one of our themes in AP US history. And you can see there are 2 challenge areas that fall under that theme. And you can see that the challenge areas, again, they encompass both content as well as historical thinking skills. So interpretation and periodizing. Those are skills that we want our students to be able to have mastery on. The content, US foreign policy, right? Primary sources, comparing and contrasting. These are historical thinking skills. Intercultural relationships is the content. So you can see each of these. I'm just going to read them real quickly for you. Actually, you know what? That would probably be a lot of me reading to you that you probably don't need me to do. So you can glance at them. But you can see there is at least one challenge area for each of the themes. Politics and power, which of course is a major focus of US history, does have 3 different challenge areas. So again, it just kind of depends on the theme. And remember, these challenge areas were developed with input from teachers, student struggles, college professors, performance on the AP exam, and input from the chief reader from the AP exam. And that's how they decided, again, on these specific challenge areas. All right, I'm going to click the slide, and we're going to zoom in even more. So for each challenge area, and again, if you're having trouble seeing the small font, just those 4 little arrows icon at the top there, you can zoom in on yours so you can see the slide a little closer. But for each challenge area, they're broken down into building blocks. And so there's a couple of things here. So if you look at the circle there, first off, above the circle, it tells you what the overall theme is. So the US history theme that is being addressed here is geography and the environment. And then the challenge area is right there in the middle of the circle. The challenge area for this one is developing claims. So that's kind of our historical thinking skill, being able to develop claims as the overarching idea. And then our content is competition for resources. So if you can kind of see how that breaks down. And then if you look at the little circles that are inside the big circle, you can see each one of those is a building block, and all 3 of these building blocks together make up one challenge area. Now there's another graphic I'm going to show you that I think makes even more sense, at least in my brain. But before we leave this slide, because your brain might work with circles, I'm more of a linear person myself. But if you look at the circles here, you can see that if you look at the first in the top little circle, it says BBA at the top. And the building blocks, BB is just building block. And then each building block is lettered. So BBA, building block A, is the first one, and building block B is the second, building block C is the third, and some challenge areas have more than 3 building blocks. It just depends on which challenge area we're talking about. If you look underneath the BBA, you'll see a P1. That tells you what period it shows up in. Now, your units might be broken down differently, which is totally fine, and we'll talk about that a little later. But the periods refer to how the AP US History framework breaks down the periods of time in US history. So building block A for this particular challenge area shows up in period 1, building block B shows up in period 3, and building block C, sorry, shows up in period 5. So you can see that the idea is for students to be able to connect these skills over time, and that's why these building blocks show up in different periods. And the building blocks are more manageable components of the challenge areas. Again, the building blocks build the student's ability to apply the historical thinking skills within a specific period. And in addition, they build their ability to apply the skills of argumentation, interpretation, analysis of evidence through each of the building blocks. Once each of the building blocks is completed, students are then able to make connections between them in the challenge area level resources and assessments. So each building block has a little quiz that goes with it, and then each challenge area has a bigger assessment of the entire challenge area. And like I said, we'll talk about assessment shortly. So here's another way of looking at how the challenge areas are, as it says here, can be part of your course. This graphic is, designed to show you how the challenge areas work into the curriculum you already have. So the AP US History course has their themes, and you can see those at the upper left where it says learning objective or themes. So those are the 7 themes of the AP US History framework. These learning objectives, like I said, are organized into our 7 themes. And the investigation of themes is structured around key concepts in 9 chronological periods. So if you look at the 2 wheels that aren't really touching, the brown wheel are the themes, and then the blue wheel are the time periods. So that is what the framework has provided for us without AP Insight. Now, what AP Insight does is it provides support in the historical thinking skills, which kind of works as the gear that helps everything go together. So again, you already have the learning objectives or the themes. You already have the time periods that, or the key and supporting concepts, as it says on this graphic, that the AP US History course is wanting you to teach. The course also asks you to teach historical thinking skills, and what Insight does is it helps support those thinking skills through resources with the learning objectives in the different time periods. So it's all working together there. To look at it a little more linearly, I can't say that word. It's still morning here. I don't know about you. California, we just got out for summer. This is my first week of summer, so my apologies. So if we look at this slide, it shows us, it will illustrate how the challenge areas, again, fit into the course. So you can see our key concepts, each of the 9 periods. And then the themes, of course, the learning objectives that you're supposed to be teaching throughout the course that overlap these different time periods. So American and national identity, politics and power, what does that look like in period 1 versus period 9, etc. And then your historical thinking skills that are supposed to be also applied across these different themes and time periods. And if you are unfamiliar with historical thinking skills, if that's something new to you, I'll drop in the chat box right here. Hopefully I have it saved. There it is. So if you are, again, if historical thinking skills is something you still have questions on, if I'm throwing out that phrase and you're like, nope, please just visit this link on AP Central, and there is a PDF as well as a recorded presentation that gives you a little more information on historical thinking skills, if that's something that you wanted support in as well. All right, so this is the graphic that shows you how the challenge areas really fit in the course throughout the entire year. So this is kind of like a one-pager screenshot of the challenge areas again throughout the entire year. This is, if what I'm about to say hopefully makes sense, this is really a horizontal, not a vertical program, if you can kind of understand that. What I mean by that is, we're going throughout the entire year, starting for some challenge areas, they start in period 1, some challenge areas start a little bit later. But the idea is each building block you're building upon itself. So you wouldn't you wouldn't take a, sorry, I have to go over here because I cannot see. I have to zoom in myself. My apologies. You wouldn't go to a certain let me rephrase that. You can't do these in isolation. You have to do them as the building blocks build on each other. This isn't really designed to be a pick and grab kind of thing like, oh, I'm teaching Native Americans today. Maybe there's something in the Insight program I can photocopy and use. It's really designed for you to systematically plan when you're going to use it and build upon it that way, horizontally across your class. It's also the focus, as you'll see, and let me go to this one, only because this one makes a little more sense to me personally. If you look at this one, you can see, and actually I'm going to full screen it on mine here. If you look at this particular slide, you can see each challenge area kind of divided into itself. So challenge area 1, primary sources, compare intercultural relationships. Okay, this graphic, I really like this one. This is the one I use for my planning. This is the exact one I use because it just makes more sense in my brain. And you can see that it says here, okay, period 1 has building block A, period 2 is where building block B and C come in, period 3 is building block D, and then our culminating big assessment also falls under period 3. So again, when I said I think my vertical and horizontal comment makes a lot more sense with this particular slide. You wouldn't want to just pick and choose. You wouldn't want to say, oh, I have a day free in period 2. Let's do a resource activity from this challenge area. Like, you would definitely want to build upon itself. You'll notice it's when we look into it a little bit more, like I said, you will have some time to open Insight and try to play around with it. You'll notice that the focus is, skill-based, just as much as content-based, because, what research has shown is that the skills, the historical thinking skills, are the foundational pieces. Certainly, we're all going to teach content, but being able to focus on developing these skills like interpretation and argumentation, that these are really foundational to being able to understanding the course. And if I go back one slide, now that I showed you the one that makes sense to me, this one might make more sense to you. The historical thinking skills on the left, so you can see analyzing evidence, interpretation, comparison, contextualization. That's all on the left-hand side. And then on the top are the themes. And then underneath, where the two match up, if you, use your two fingers or whatever, you can see, okay, geography and environment, interpretation, okay, something shows up in period 1. So that particular slide may be more helpful to you. For me, the one that I'm showing right now is the one that just made a little more sense in my brain. But again, both tools are there for you to use. Challenge areas connect thematic learning objectives and skills and apply them through the building blocks across the periods. This enables you to scaffold your students' ability to apply the skills throughout the course. Okay. So if we look at this next one, oops, I think Chris logged out and backed in again, so let's let her in. All right, so if you look at this, this is, again, a screenshot. This is when we log in. This is what you would be able to see on your screen when we actually log into AP Insight. The instructional and assessments resources in AP Insight are organized by challenge area. And for each challenge area, the resources are organized into 4 stages. So stage 1 is prepare. Again, I said this a little earlier, but Michael, you came in, so I'll say it again. So prepare is to understand what students might struggle with. The teaching part is the teaching part, I'm sorry, is the instructional resources for your classroom. The assess are the quizzes, as well as the kind of bigger assessments that we'll talk about a little later. And then the act part is for processing feedback and remediation. So I'm going to go into a little more detail just about each of these areas, and then I promise we will have some time for you to actually log into Insight and play around with it and see if you have any questions once you actually log in. But first, let's go over this so you know what you're going to see. So the first, of course, tab is the Prepare tab. And you can find information about the content and skills in each challenge area. So it says unpack the challenge area. And when you unpack the challenge area, what you're doing is you're walking yourself through the content and the skills of the challenge area, as well as the different building blocks that are going to show up in the challenge area. And the Prepare tab is designed to illustrate the connections between the building blocks and also highlight the main reasons that students typically struggle with the content or the skill. The guide to the challenge area will provide you with detailed information about how the building blocks and challenge areas relate to the learning objectives, as well as to the key concepts in the curriculum framework. And it will also give you some information about why students tend to struggle in these areas. So again, the Prepare is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's giving you all the information that you need to know why this particular challenge area was developed, how it ties in to the AP US History framework, and really gives you the background you might need before you implement the resources. Now, the teacher resources, you can see here, make sure I have the slide. Okay, the teacher resources involve 3 different things. So when you go to the Teach section is where the key instructional resources can be found. And there's really 3 types of resources, and you can see the bullet points there: students' progress sheets, real-world case studies, and the performance tasks. Now, the student progress sheets is a way of enabling students to evaluate their own understanding as well as to track their own progress. And it really, I mean, this is an important part because it gives students ownership on their own understanding and misunderstandings. There are 2 parts. So part 1 is a misunderstanding check. And these are statements that require students to provide a reason for agreeing or disagreeing. And again, when we go into Insight, you'll be able to click on that misunderstanding check and have a better idea. But basically, it has questions, and the students, all they have to do is do they agree or disagree with a statement for a lot of them, and it provides them with misunderstanding. Oh, and you know what? I think you have an example right there. Silly me. So if you look at the example there, that would be an example of the misunderstanding check. Part 2 is a self-evaluation where students rate their own level of understanding. And the progress sheet can be a useful tool to use with students to help them develop their own ability to articulate what they know and what they don't know. And like I said, it can help students take ownership of their learning and evaluate how they are understanding. And it also helps them develop how their understanding progresses over the course of the building blocks and the challenge areas. Because again, this challenge area will go over each challenge area, will go over a number of periods. So by having them reflect, they can actually, throughout the course of the year, see their own growth for different historical thinking skills and their own understanding. The teacher version that's shown on the slide does contain sample answers. Of course, the student version wouldn't have the sample answers because your students would be filling that in themselves. The next part is the real world case study. And the idea of the real world case study is helping show the relevance and tying together the resource activity they're going to do with something going on in the real world. So for each challenge area, there's a resource that provides a link to a real world application or context. And this is something teachers can use to help engage students. And again, it highlights the relevance or significance of what they're about to learn. One way to use this resource would be to use guided questions to help students connect the resource to the content of the challenge area. Yeah, it's also a nice, I don't know if the word hook is still in fashion, but it's kind of like a nice engaging hook for the students as well. Now the performing tasks are what I think of as kind of like the meat of the instruction. The performance tasks are the 45-minute lessons that are designed to give students the opportunity to practice and build their ability to apply the targeted thinking skills. And they're provided at both building block and challenge area levels. So there we go. So the performance tasks, like I said, are the lessons that are constructed to help elicit whether students have developed the knowledge and skills relevant to the building block or challenge area. Each performance task, at least in the teacher version, has an explanation of the background, rationale for the design of the task, the activities aligned with the learning targets, the checks for understanding, an evaluative rubric, as well as suggestions to help students close the gap. So like I said, it's the meat of it. So in a nutshell, the teach part of this is about building understanding and addressing misunderstanding. And these lessons, sorry, let me restate that. These carefully crafted lesson plans can be used to help students develop and apply the skills of the building block and challenge areas prior to taking the quizzes or assessments. So again, this is really the, and each performance task is a little bit different. The one that I kind of piloted, again, I didn't use the technology piece, but I did pilot some of just the instructional materials. And so, depending on the challenge area, they might involve looking at different excerpts or passages, or evaluating or analyzing political cartoons, and that sort of thing. So it's the actual 45-minute, if you lack of a better word, the lesson part of it. But remember, this is all formative. And the idea, of course, is for the students to be able to gain skills through the performance task. And then when they go on to the building block quiz, the quiz will be able to assess, okay, how much did I really master through the performance task? So speaking of which, let's look at the assess part. So this is the section where you'll be able to find the building block and challenge area assessments. And again, I know it's a lot of stuff to take in, but one more time, at the end of each building block, so building block A, B, C, and so on, there is a little quiz. And again, these are meant to be formative quizzes, and it's really for students and yourself to gauge what sort of level of mastery your students as a whole and as individuals got through doing these performance tasks. So prior to assigning the quizzes and the kind of longer assessments at the end of the entire challenge area, it's worth reviewing the success criteria the assessment aims to evaluate to be sure students have been taught the relevant knowledge or skills. So that's just a little reminder about backwards planning, making sure you know ahead of time what you're preparing students for. So the building block quizzes are really the thing that on a personal level totally sold me on Insight. because it solved a problem that I have been dealing with for 10 years, but I'll talk about that in a second when we look at this. So the building block quizzes provide formative feedback to help students identify their possible misunderstandings. The assessments are designed to measure mastery of the success criteria, as well as pinpoint specific misunderstandings based on the answers they select. The quizzes are a quick check for understanding and are either multiple choice or short answer questions. And depending on your own school's capability, you can give these online if you have access to computers. You can also give them offline. And if you do give quizzes offline, you can scan them, or you as the teacher can enter their responses. So for example, for a multiple choice test, if you don't have capability to use computers in your class, you can have them take it paper and pencil, and then you can input what their answers were, and that way they'll still get the online feedback that I'm about to talk to. You can also access these quizzes on a mobile platform like a smartphone or a notepad. And the really cool thing, and like I said, the thing that really sold me, is that the students will get immediate feedback. So as the students take the online quiz, multiple choice quiz, for example, at the end of a building block, it instantly, as whenever you, of course, set it up to give them feedback, whether it's later in the period, right when they're done, the next day, however you set that up, but they'll get immediate feedback, and it will tell them why they got the answer wrong, what was their misunderstanding, in a pretty deep, kind of level. And the students, of course, will have the time to reflect on what that misunderstanding meant. And again, I didn't ask you how large your classes were, I didn't even ask what state you are all from. But I do know that my school is well, for California, a large school. We have 2,500 kids. And so I have 4 periods or sections of AP US history. And our student population, again, since it's a larger school, my classes are generally 36. They've been as big as 41, and they've been as small as 33. But, generally 36 is the average for my classes. And so, being totally transparent, I can't always give them instant feedback with, 140 AP kids. It's just slightly impossible. So that I really thought this was an amazing feature, that they'd be able to take the quiz and be able to get that feedback instantly, and really grow from that without me needing to sit down and figure it all out myself. I was kind of floored by that when I first saw it. So now the challenge area assessments, I'm hoping Terry's wow is for wow, that's awesome, and not wow, you have big classes. So either way, but anyway, I really thought that was such a cool feature. The challenge area assessments are the end big culminating assessment. So again, each building block has a little quiz. Oh, and I'm sorry, let me say one more thing before we move on to the challenge area assessments. The building block quizzes are not designed to take the whole period. Certainly, if you want to go with the online feedback right away, if you do have capability to use computers and you can get that feedback right away without you having to enter anything, you can certainly, move to the reflection piece in the same period. But the building block quizzes are not designed to take more than 10 to 15 minutes, so you don't have to worry about eating up a whole class with the quizzes. Now, the challenge area assessments are longer. They're designed to be about 40 minutes. So the challenge area assessments, when you do prepare and try to figure out how to work these things into the classroom, you are going to have to figure out, for the end of the 10 challenge areas, there are then 10 big assessments that go with them. So again, you'd have to figure out the 10 times in the year that you would be able to integrate this. So challenge area assessments are free response questions, and they measure how well the students are able to make connections across all the building blocks. So again, this is once all the building blocks are done, this is the big finale. And they comprise of either 3 to 4 short answer questions. So some challenge areas will end with short answer questions. Some will end with a DBQ, and some will end with a long essay. And as I just said, they're designed to be 40 minutes, and that means the DBQ has been adapted In order for the DBQ to be able to be completed in one class period, there are only 4 documents. And the rubrics mirror the exam. So the rubrics designed to grade these are, of course, mirroring the AP exam. And so the rubrics are provided to score the responses. Now, there is no magical robot. So that means that you will certainly still be needing to grade your written responses. The computer, of course, can give immediate feedback for the multiple choice quizzes, but when we look at the assessments, that's something you will still have to grade. However, there will be additional online training to help score responses, and there will be professional learning communities throughout the year that are focused on scoring. So don't be too overwhelmed by the scoring. There will be support throughout the year to help with those big culminating assessments and how to best score those. Finally, the ACT section is where you can view quiz and assessment results, as well as determine next steps based on assessment feedback. So each student, there we go, each student is provided with an individual report that explains their personal misunderstandings based on their responses. So for each identified potential misunderstanding, there's a recommended next step or resources that students can use independently to help them address that misunderstanding. And, depending on how your class works, you may, require them to do the next step. It may be optional. I mean, it really, that sort of implementation will, definitely be up to you and how you would work this in. But each student, again, will get their own report, and you should have an example on the screen right now of what that would look like. You, as a teacher, also will get a class report. And the class report provides a summary of student performance in terms of mastery of skills and content in the building block or challenge area. And this report shows the percentage of students that got questions wrong and allows the teachers to see the questions that cause the most problems for the class. So again, you can see here the overall kind of screenshot of what a class report would look like, who had mastery, who didn't, and the percentage of the questions. The percentage of the questions. I got a little ahead of myself. Here's the student results. So again, you have the, you have the overall class report that provides a summary of the percentage of students that got questions wrong. You also have the student results that provide the further breakdown, not only showing which students got which questions wrong, but also a little more detail about the incorrect answer they selected. And this is a really quick way to see if, all the students in your class are sharing a particular misunderstanding. So for example, if you look at, I guess, the middle column there, you can see that a lot of the students who got this question wrong, I believe a lot of them picked C or possibly D or B. I'm sorry, I can't see that far. I should zoom in, shouldn't I? But the idea is you can review whatever misunderstanding. So if a lot of students did pick C, you go back as a class and say, okay, why did we all pick letter C? And it's not like that's a new, novel, brilliant idea, but this program sure makes it easy because it's already there for you. So it's done the algorithm and the bringing all the numbers together for you, and all you have to do is look at the report to figure out what your next steps should be. And in the ACT section, there's also, like I probably mentioned with 2 slides ago, there is a next steps guide, and it provides the suggestions and guidance to help both the teachers and students reflect on and process the feedback they get from the assessments. And there are recommended next steps resources associated with each misunderstanding. So again, each student will probably have, the next steps will differ based on the student performance. So each student may have different next steps, again, depending on their level of mastery. And, you as a teacher decide if the next steps are something that will be completed in small groups, if everybody who had the same next steps works together. If you're just going to do them all as a class, you think it's beneficial for everybody to do the next step for a particular challenge area. Or if it's something that individual students you want them to do individually, that's totally fine too. It's just dependent on what works best for your student population. All right. I think we are at the point where now that you have been through the main steps of the formative assessment process, you've seen a little bit about the prepare, you've seen a little bit about the teach, you've seen a little bit about the assess, and you've seen a little bit about the act. You will now have the opportunity to log into the Insight system and familiarize yourself with the resources so far. So if you want to go ahead and open another window and log into AP Insight, keep the presentation screen open. If you have access to multiple subjects, make sure you select AP US History from a drop-down menu. If you only have access to AP US History, you don't need to worry about that. So go ahead and log in. If you're having difficulty logging in, oh, you're in. Okay, we have one in. Perfect. So again, go ahead and log in, and once I make sure everyone's logged in, we will go ahead and keep on going. If you have difficulty logging in, please let me know, and I can help you get a temporary demo login, so at least you can log in. Hopefully, you'll be able to log in with your AP audit password and username. So Terry is in. Let me type to Chris. Okay, and if you are already logged in, I know Terry is in. What you're going to do is you are going to have about 10 minutes here to select a challenge area. Start with the Prepare tab, unpack it. You can move on to looking at the Teach resources. Basically, this is your time to mess around with the website. Thank you, Michael. To mess around with the website, and then if you have any questions, of course, just go ahead and type them in. I am going to set a timer to keep us on time here, just to make sure we don't take too much time. So we'll set about 10 minutes here, and then so again, just feel free to go to the website, and then if you have any questions, regarding anything, if you're having trouble with anything, but really you're just messing around, should probably stop talking so you can focus. Okay, we'll return to the presentation in about 2 minutes. It's been about 8 minutes now. All right, well, that was about 10 minutes. So we're going to jump back into the presentation just to finish this up and really talk about the strategic planning part of working insight into your classes. So now that you've played around with the different tabs to prepare, the assess, perhaps, definitely probably went to the teach, it's important to figure out, okay, how am I actually going to implement all of this into my course? Um, so it's just, I can't overemphasize how important it is to plan when you will be incorporating the AP Insight materials into your course. Creating a plan is going to help you think through the time you need to utilize the lesson, the assessments, the feedback. Um, every school population is a little bit different. Everyone's calendar is a little bit different. Like I said, I just started summer this week. So for some of you, you may be going back in August. I'm going back in September. So certainly when we're going to use the materials is going to vary. And, you know, your student population is, you know, we all teach very different students. So, you know, depending on your area, whether you have, you know, a high population of EL learners like I do, or if you have a different population, you know, it's going to affect how much time you're going to need for things like reflection and feedback. So if you can see at the bottom, you should have two things under reading materials that you can download. So if you wouldn't mind um, downloading these documents from reading materials, the topic translation sample, the topic translation template, and there is a sample syllabus as well if you need the sample syllabus, or if you know your own syllabus and your own calendar, you can certainly use your own syllabus and how you organize the course. The sample syllabus is there if you need one. And then if you wouldn't mind clicking on the raise hand so I know that you have these documents. Make sure you came back. And welcome to Melissa. Melissa has arrived. So like I said, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand when you've downloaded these documents, that would be great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Terry. And then Melissa is typing because she's probably saying, what in the world is happening? No problem, Melissa. There was actually a couple of different times listed for this presentation anyway. All these presentations are recording, so you are certainly welcome to, after this, at the very end, I'll show you where those recordings are. And we are at the end of this, but you can certainly go back and listen to another presentation, if not this one, another one that's just like it. So you can catch up on all the stuff you missed. No big deal. We are to the point where we are looking at how to incorporate these insight challenge areas and assessments into our courses. So again, it looks like you have downloaded the things you needed. So let's look at the topic translation. The topic translation that you downloaded provides a crosswalk, if you will, for how the challenge area and building blocks map to the topics of the course. So if you look at the sample topic translation, the sample one shows how one teacher used the list of topics to identify where in her syllabus she teaches these building blocks. And again, if you're having trouble seeing the small font on the screen, you can always zoom in using that icon with the 4 arrows if you want to look at the screen, or if you look at the one downloaded, of course, you don't need to do that. But again, if you look at the sample topic translation, you can see that on the left-hand side, there is the challenge area. And then the next column shows you the different building blocks. I believe the one that is on the screen is American and National Identity. Let's see if I am correct. And so it is. Wonderful. Again, you can see the theme is American National Identity. The challenge area is supporting claims, continuity and change over time. Our content area is ethnicity and assimilation, and then it shows you in the second column again where these building blocks show up. Building block A is in period 5, B in period 6, and so on. And then if you look at the third column, it shows you the associated topics here. At least, again, I'm going by the one on the slide. It shows you the associated topics. And then finally, on the sample, as well as the one on the screen here, it shows us where the teacher has put in, okay, where would this fall in my unit, right? Where would building block A fall in my personal teaching? So that is the idea of these documents are really designed to help you figure out, okay, where am I going to put this stuff into my teaching? So again, if you're using the sample syllabus, that's fine. If you're using your own personal syllabus, that's just fine too. And again, the idea is for you to be able to figure out for these different challenge areas where you would put them into your teaching. You also probably have noticed that the building blocks for challenge areas, that there can be multiple building blocks from different challenge areas in a single unit or period. And that's fine. It's designed that way because, again, we're looking at different historical thinking skills throughout the course. So again, you'll find that, for example, in period 1, there's a number of building blocks from different challenge areas, and that's totally fine. Also, just a friendly reminder, remember that the building blocks for a challenge area do need to be completed prior to doing the challenge area assessment. So again, if you look at the first challenge area in the topic translation that I had gone over, the continuity and change, ethnic identities and assimilations, the earliest that you could assign the challenge area assessment would be period 8. So if we just look at this example one, you can see that your culminating big finale challenge area assessment, the earliest you could assign it is whenever you are in period 8, because you can't assign that last assessment until all the building blocks have been completed. So that is what's meant by that. So when you develop your plan, there's this nice handy little graphic for you that kind of just summarizes the process of how to develop your plan using the topic translation. So using your own syllabus, or the sample syllabus, you identify the period or topic to focus on. The topic translation, as it says here, can help you find the related challenge areas and building blocks. And then the last column, like we already went over, is where you fill in where you would teach that particular challenge area. You can order this by unit number to have them in sequential order. You can use this sample as your own starting point. But again, this is really the things that you've downloaded have been developed to try and help you figure out how to best plan. And if you were to look at the recording online and go back to the earlier slides, for me personally, the slide that I had used to plan, and I don't want to make you dizzy by clicking through a million slides here, but the slide that I had used to plan is the overall big screenshot slide that says challenge area, and then it shows you where the building blocks come in, and it shows you where the challenge area ends. That's what I used. Again, however you want to organize this for yourself is fine. I found the overall year screenshot helpful for me. So again, the template is here to help you plan, and as well as that overarching slide that shows you the entire year with the challenge areas broken down for you and where the building blocks come in. For me, that one was actually just as helpful as this template that you've downloaded. There is also, there are, excuse me, are, not is, there are also online modules that can help you complete your plan, which you can see here in the slide. Remember that when you are planning, performance tasks are designed to take about 45 minutes. So the instructional resources we looked at, the performance task itself is designed to take about 45 minutes. The building block quizzes that come at the end of each building block A, building block B, etc. Those are designed to take about 10 to 15 minutes. And then the big culminating challenge area assessment that comes at the very end of the challenge area, those are designed to take 40 minutes. So again, that kind of helps you as well. I'm on a traditional schedule with 55-minute classes. I know some people have block scheduling, so you do need to take those things into account. If you're on a block schedule, your performance task is not going to take you the whole period. If you're on a block schedule, depending on your own class, perhaps you do the performance task and the quiz in one day, whereas in my class, it would be 2 separate days. You would do the quiz. We wouldn't have time to do the quiz the same day. Remember also to allow time for processing the feedback. Don't try to rush the kids through it. Remember, the ultimate goal of the program here is to close the gaps in understanding. So remember, at the very beginning, these 10 challenge areas were created to pinpoint foundational and critical areas where students had misunderstandings. So we want to make sure we give the kids the time. And trust me, I'm with you. I know that time is something we never have enough of. I teach econ as well, so opportunity cost, either money or time, we never have enough of them. But it is important to allow the students to be able to process feedback and give them the ability to take those next steps to close the gap and allow them to reflect on their own misunderstandings and their own understandings as they start to master certain historical thinking skills, and really allow them to have that ownership. Again, there is an online module that can help you develop your plan further, and we will locate these resources in just a couple of minutes. Actually, a couple of seconds. Let's be real. All right, like I said, the strategic planning section provides several forms of help and further training. If you need a refresher or if there was any confusion on the time for today, the first link is a recording of a welcome session just like this one. So again, if you look at this slide, this slide shows you a screenshot of the AP Insight page. So again, if you go to the strategic planning section on the AP Insight page, this is where you will find these these links. So again, one more time, the first link is a recording of a welcome session just like this one. So again, if your audio was off or you for some reason weren't able to come at the beginning, you can certainly click on a recording and hear whatever you missed. The Experience AP Insight section will take you through both the teacher and student experience of using AP Insight and explain how to use the resources. The Explore AP Insight section helps with using the features of the site. For example, it will give you information on how to assign the assessments for the students. You can expect to spend about 30 to 45 minutes per each module. You will need to fill out a survey at the end of each module so your completion can be recorded for CEU credit and also for attendance purposes. Also in the professional learning section are PLCs or professional learning communities, and these are live webinar sessions that are held throughout the year. These live online sessions run about an hour to an hour and a half and are on various topics that are designed to support your current instruction. For example, some past PLC topics have included using AP Insight in your classroom, developing lessons using AP Insight, scoring constructed responses, and strategies for providing actionable feedback to students. You also want to keep an eye on your email as well as on the Insight homepage during the school year for invitations to these professional learning community sessions. Finally, our Sharing What Works part is a section of the Insight page that links you to a discussion group where you can get ideas and share experiences with other AP Insight teachers. So in the Share What Works section, again, there is a discussion group where you can get ideas and share experiences with other AP Insight teachers. The discussion boards have an AP Insight teacher as a moderator who can help answer the questions. So if you wouldn't mind taking the last few minutes, assuming you still have your other page open, if you wouldn't mind going to the Share What Works section. Again, I am so sorry, summer. If you go to the Share What Works section, if you're on the AP Insight homepage, you can just click the Discussions tab and you'll get there. And if you wouldn't mind, in the last few minutes, posting a key takeaway or remaining question on the Share What Works page of the Insight website. So again, if you came to the training a little bit late, no big deal. You can log into the AP Insight website. And again, if you wouldn't mind sharing your either key, again, a key takeaway from today's training or a question you still have, you can see that the very top thread under the AP, the very top thread under the discussion board, excuse me, says questions and takeaways June 30th. You can just click on that and reply to it with either a key takeaway or a remaining question. And one of the AP Insight teachers would be happy to answer any questions. And certainly this is something you will want to check throughout the year as more people post questions and things as the AP US History Insight rolls out in bigger numbers. Finally, going back to our slides here, finally, if you have any remaining questions, go ahead and type those into the chat bars. And if you have any questions that for some reason come up later, you can always email apinsight@collegeboard.org. And finally, if you wouldn't mind completing the survey that is linked on this slide here, that would be awesome. Again, if you wouldn't mind, filling that out so we can respond to the feedback and make any changes that are necessary. So again, there is a link there to a survey if you wouldn't mind clicking on that and then taking the survey. And I will actually put the link here as well. I'm sure I could copy it faster, but look, I'm already typing, so let's just do this. There we go. Okay, so that should be a link to the survey as well. And then I'm going to be online for another 15 minutes to answer any questions you have. Um, if you do not have any questions, you are certainly free to go. Remember that the email that I had posted for AP Insight, you can address questions there, or simply go to the discussion board where a lot of AP Insight teachers will be checking to answer any questions you have. Again, any questions you have, you can certainly type. I see one from Terry here. But other than that, I'm going to click to our finale side. Like I said, you are set up for success now. You have access to this website to support your summer planning as well as your next academic year. Like I said, I will be around for 15 minutes. And I'm also going to unmute. If you have a mic, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody's mic so that way if you have questions and you'd prefer just asking them, we could do that as well. So let me quickly unmute. That muted me. That's just not going to work. Okay. So everybody's microphone should be enabled, I think. All right, but I'll answer Terry's question. Has there been any discussion integrating this with Google Classroom? I actually asked the same question. The resource materials I know you can put into your Google Classroom because I did ask the same question. As for the assessments, I think that is a question I will make sure to ask AP Insight on your behalf and make sure we get an answer to that quickly for you. I'm sure a lot of people have that same question. I use Classroom as well. I know, again, the resources you are able to put in the classroom, they don't want anything going on public. So if you have a public, even a private website for your class outside of Google Classroom, this material shouldn't be posted to a website. However, I have been told that you can integrate it into your Google Classroom as an assignment for these instructional resources for the performance tasks. But I will clarify on the other parts. Okay, none of you are talking, so it must mean I did not do your microphones right. It's just been a bad day for audio. So again, oh, there we go. Microphone rights. All right, on my end, it says you have rights on microphones. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask. Or just type. Yeah, Michael's typing. Oh, this is probably a better idea. Oh, thank you, Michael. Everyone, again, enjoy your summer day. I assume we're all on summer. It is the end of June, so hopefully everybody's out by now. Edmodo, I'm not 100% sure of. Chris, I don't know if you ever got your audio fixed, so let me type into you. So I am not 100% sure on Edmodo. I will be sure to ask on your behalf. Oops, behalf. And Chris, if you can hear me, I'm sending you a private message to where you can maybe give me your email address so I can get that back to you. All right.